Welcome to the Ultimate Depression Survival Kit, How to Overcome and Master Depression with me, Dr. Moses Simuyemba. Today we look at the number one method to gain absolute mental freedom. Life is difficult. This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we truly see this, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. This is the opening paragraph of a book titled The Road Less Traveled by Dr. M. Scott Peck. It is a marvelous book, one that I've read several times, beginning in my undergraduate days at medical school. And it's a book that has changed my life profoundly and changed how I handle life's issues and perceive life's issues. I would urge you, if you have a chance, to read this book. It'll give you a fresh perspective on a lot of things. Dr. Peck wrote this book based on his experience as a psychiatrist over decades, dealing with patients from a mental health perspective. And he found that there are certain things common to a lot of the patients he dealt with. But he also found that there are things that they could do better in order to be free from whatever mental health issues they were facing and to tackle them better. It is based on this book that I share what I have to share, but also from personal experience and importantly also from research around this area. Let me explain further some of the arguments that Dr. Peck puts forward in his book, The Road Less Traveled. He says life is a series of problems. Life is difficult and thus always presents us with challenges or problems, and thus we are constantly solving problems in life. And by solving problems, he says, we grow, but solving problems requires discipline. He goes further to say that the process of confronting and solving problems is a difficult one because problems can evoke in us grief, frustration, sadness, loneliness, guilt, fear, anger, anxiety, anguish, and despair. And let's face it, most of us do not like to experience those feelings. These feelings are uncomfortable and can be very painful, he adds. It is because of this pain and discomfort that we call them problems to begin with. But it is in the process of meeting and solving problems that life has its meaning. Solving problems distinguishes between success and failure. Problems call forth courage and wisdom. They create courage and wisdom. And it is only because of problems that we grow mentally and spiritually. When we desire to challenge the growth of the human spirit, we challenge and encourage the human capacity to solve problems, he says. It is through the pain of confronting and solving problems that we learn. However, most people, fearing the pain involved in confronting and solving problems, avoid confronting those problems. The strategies they use is procrastination, ignoring the problems, trying to forget about the problems, pretending the problems do not exist, taking drugs or some form of escape, skirting around the problems, and he goes on to add that in his experience and practice of psychiatry, this is one of the things that contributes to mental illness, is this desire of people to avoid problems in order to avoid facing the pain and discomfort that those problems bring. We will continue with the issue of problems and confronting them in a short while. Let me deviate now a little bit to values, because this is an important thing to consider when it comes to confronting and dealing with our problems. So what are values? Values, as most of you are probably already aware, are important and lasting beliefs or ideals about what is good, what is bad or desirable and undesirable. Values influence our behavior and attitudes and serve as our guide in all situations. Everyone has values whether they know it or not, and whether good or bad, it is what guides their actions. But it is better to be deliberate about your values. In other words, better to know what your values are rather than work in default mode. Personally, I had a chance to reflect on my personal values when I was going through my life coach training. And during that time, I coined a mission statement for myself, which I've improved over the years. But it states that I am a student and teacher of self actualization through love and faith in self and others and dedication to the truth with God's guidance. So you can see there in bold the values that I exemplify in my life: love, faith, and truth. And it is truth that I want to focus on in the next few slides. Let us talk about dedication to the truth. Dr. Scott Peck, in his book, says that one of the biggest causes of mental problems in people is that they do not want to acknowledge and live by the truth. Thus, they struggle with the lies that they put up to fit their version of the truth, which ultimately is not in line with the reality and thus leads to inner conflict. Their reality and their perceptions are mismatched. And he says this can contribute to mental illness or not living life properly or living a fulfilled life. Why is living by the truth important? Well, because confronting and solving our problems requires that we live by the truth. Only when we see life through the correct lens of truth can we identify and deal with our problems. Therefore, confronting problems means confronting the truth. When we avoid the truth, then we avoid the realities of our situation, we avoid our problems, and therefore we cannot deal with those problems if we are not living by the truth. Here are just some examples of this, and I do go in detail about this principle in my book, Destiny on Purpose. If you have a chance to read that, please do. But here are some examples, some lies people tell themselves. Someone who was neglected as a child, for instance, might tell themselves this lie: my parents loved me, which is in contradiction to how the parents behaved towards that person. Or someone who has an abusive partner might say, he hits me because he loves me. You see how that is avoiding the truth. Someone who was sexually abused as a child might say, or at any other time might say, it was my fault. He is a good person. Or someone who has a bad character might say, people around me are jealous of me. That is why they hate me. Now, these statements might be correct, but you see, the reality of what happened to you does not match the statement. In other words, this is a way to avoid the truth and not confront the truth. When we do not see or acknowledge the truth of our situation, this creates conflict in our minds. Using the examples I just gave you, for example, you cannot reconcile how a loving parent neglected or abused you. Thus, you have a wrong perception of what love is if you hang on to that idea. Second example, you cannot reconcile how a loving partner continually cheats on you or hurts your feelings. Therefore, you have the idea that you are imperfect because they would not cheat on you without reason. And lastly, using the other example, I do not have an alcohol problem. I have it under control. You see how that is denying the truth or walking away from the truth, trying to tiptoe away from the truth. Such conflict ultimately leads us down the road of self-doubt, low self-esteem, and confusion, because the truth we are unwilling to face leads us to wrong conclusions based on the lies that we prefer to believe instead. However, you must deal with the unpleasant truths of your life. You must confront and deal with these unpleasant truths, otherwise they grow and become real roadblocks to your progress and freedom. Without confronting them, you will never have the right solutions to the challenges you face. So even with depression, you must confront certain truths about your life in order for you to address those truths. If you have a problem with smoking, you have to confront that. If you have a problem with alcohol, you have to confront that. If you have people that have hurt you in the past, you have to confront that. You have to confront certain lifestyle issues that may not be good for you. So dealing with unpleasant truths ultimately can lead to freedom in terms of dealing with depression even. Let's go back to the same examples we used. If one was to acknowledge the truth, then they would have to say, my parents never loved me. That is why they abused and neglected me. A loving parent would never do that to their child. That is the truth of the situation if you were neglected or abused as a child, right? Second example about the partner. The truth would have to be, my partner does not love me nor consider my feelings. That is why he continuously cheats on me and makes me feel worthless. Last example about drinking. The truth would be something to the extent of, my drinking is out of control. It is affecting my work and relationships. I need to do something about it. You see, that is how that is in stark contradiction to the earlier statements where one might have been trying to avoid the truth. But acknowledging the fact that your parents did not love you is a very hard thing to deal with, right? That is why in the first place, there might be a desire to avoid that reality. Avoiding the reality that your partner actually doesn't love you means that you're confronting a very unpleasant thing, and now you have forced to confront what to do about that. Confronting your alcohol problem means now you have to decide what to do about it. So living by the truth can be difficult because of these reasons, and that is why Dr. Peck points out in his book that people avoid facing the truth when it comes to dealing with their problems. But I have found from experience that facing the truth liberates you. Facing the truth empowers you. And facing the truth frees you. In the words of Jesus the Christ, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, he was referring to something different, and the context was different. But I have found that this statement applies to all areas of your life. When you know the truth, no matter how unpleasant it is, the truth indeed makes you free. Why does the truth make you free? Well, armed with the truth, you have the correct map of life. You can let go of your old false map that led you to wrong decisions and make wrong turns. With the truth, you can make the right decisions based on the reality of the situation and not on what you would like it to be. Knowing the truth also requires action. Once you know the truth of your situation, you must take action. That action will be good because it is based on the absolute truth, and it will give you release emotionally and mentally. You can then put up practical ways to deal with the situation and face it head on, no matter how unpleasant it is. You see, there is no way you can confront the truth and not be forced or not be compelled to take action, because facing the truth requires you to take action. And that is why sometimes people would rather not face the truth, because when they don't face the truth, then they do not have to take action on their situation because they believe the lies they tell themselves about their situation. In my experience with dealing with depression and seeing other people deal with depression, and from literature, I have found that one of the biggest actions you must take once you know the truth and confront the truth is forgiveness. This is a big one. Forgiveness of self and others. Because let's face it, sometimes it is other people that let us down, disappoint us, or hurt us. But sometimes it is ourselves that let ourselves down and disappoint ourselves. So we need to practice forgiveness both of self and of others. This is a very powerful principle, and let me share a little bit more about this as we go along. So what is the value of forgiveness? Why should you forgive? Well, you do not forgive for the sake of the person who hurt you. That is something that is misunderstood about forgiveness. It is not about the other person. You forgive for your own sake. Why? Because forgiveness heals you. Not the person who hurt you, though it may also lead them to healing. Once they know that you forgive them, it may lead them to reflect on what they did and how they hurt you, and therefore may help them also to a place of healing and a place of peace. But ultimately, the primary aim of forgiveness is for you to heal yourself and to free yourself. Forgiveness gives you peace. Forgiveness is letting go of that heavy burden you carry. Forgiveness is breaking bad emotional ties, because when you hang on to the hurt somebody has caused you, when you hang on to what somebody else did to you, what does that do? It ties them to you for as long as you have those feelings towards them. It bonds them to you in some way, and therefore you are tied to them beyond the thing that hurt you, beyond the thing that they did to you. You continue to carry this burden of them in your life. Forgiveness is about letting go of those chains, freeing yourself of that weight, and letting yourself be at peace with what happened. I often say that I want to live my life with my heart floating in the wind, feeling light as a feather. I'm sure you've all experienced this feeling when you have bad emotions such as unforgiveness or hurt from another person. Your heart feels heavy and burdened. It's like it's so heavy in your chest, you can almost tell where it is. And that is the feeling I always guard myself against. When I experience such feelings, I want to let them go so that my heart is lighter and it feels as light as a feather that I can float in the wind. That is a good feeling for me because I know that when I have that feeling, I'm at a good place emotionally, mentally, and I have let go of negative emotions. So when you acknowledge the truth and choose to forgive rather than hang on to past hurts, you will feel lighter, you will gain mental energy, and you will free yourself of a very heavy burden. But forgiving is not enough. Forgiving comes with dealing with the consequences or effects of what you have been through. It doesn't negate what happened. It doesn't negate the effects of what happened to you. You must still deal with those things. You must face the damage or hurt it has caused you and find ways to fix that. Or at the very least, if you cannot fix it, you must find ways to live with it and be at peace with it. But here is what forgiveness does not mean, because there is a lot of misconceptions about what forgiveness means. When you forgive someone, what does that mean in terms of your behavior towards them or your interaction towards them? Here is my take on what forgiveness does not mean. Forgiveness does not mean getting yourself back in the situation that hurt you. You can forgive somebody, an unfaithful partner, a hurtful partner, but that does not mean you have to stay in the relationship with them. You can forgive and move on and start a new life on your own. You can forgive a neglectful and abusive parent, but that does not mean you have to still associate with them or allow them to abuse you. You can move away to somewhere you do not have to interact with them so often, for example. You can forgive yourself for your drinking problem, but that does not mean you can go back to the bar at any time you feel like. So my message here is that forgiveness does not mean that you should still be in a relationship with somebody that hurt you, that you should still interact them or allow them to be in your life. I always compare this to a thief, for instance. If a thief breaks into your house, right, and steals something, and you catch them, and through that process you forgive them, that does not mean that you allow the thief access to your house again. Because what will happen? They will come into your house and steal from you again. So we have to be smart about forgiveness. It means dealing with the situation, but it also means protecting ourselves from future hurts. And sometimes it means getting ourselves out of the situation that led us to be hurt in the first place, whether that is a harmful relationship, a harmful job, or a harmful situation. We need to deal with that and get out of it. Forgiveness does mean letting go of that emotional load and finding healing from the hurt and damage it caused, and finding ways to not get back yourself in the situation that hurt you. That is what forgiveness means. It is acknowledging the truth of your situation, acknowledging the pain and discomfort of your situation and what happened. It is about dealing with the consequences of that situation in terms of finding healing, finding peace for yourself, finding ways to cope with it, finding ways to not let it affect you and dictate your whole life and your future. And it is about finding ways to not get yourself back in the situation that caused you to be hurt. That is what forgiveness means for me. So before you think I'm presenting this from nowhere and from my head, here are a few studies around forgiveness and depression. Chung in 2016 published a study called Relation Between Lack of Forgiveness and Depression, the Moderating Effect of Self-Compassion. And in summary, it was found that self-compassion moderated the relationship between lack of forgiveness and depression. The relationship was stronger for those low on self-compassion. In other words, forgiveness had a protective effect on depression, according to this study. And as I mentioned in other videos, if you want to read more about these studies or read them in more detail, they are attached at the bottom of every page on each day, and you can also get the summary PDF document for you to look at. Charbonneau in 2018 also published a study on forgiveness titled Effectiveness of Forgiveness Skill on Anxiety and Depression Among Women Victims of Sexual Abuse in Childhood. So a very important study that looked at what happened to these women during their childhood in terms of childhood trauma that we discussed earlier in earlier videos. The results showed that forgiveness skill is effective in reducing anxiety and depression among women victims, of sexual abuse in childhood. The result is in consistency with findings of other studies that showed forgiveness could lead to significant reduction of negative mood. So you see an important study there that shows that forgiveness led to less depression symptoms in these women who are victims of sexual abuse in childhood. Another study by Desuteret et al., published in 2016, Forgiveness, Ego, Integrity, and Depressive Symptoms in Community Dwelling and Residential Elderly Adults. They found that forgiveness and depression were negatively associated in both residential elderly individuals and community dwelling elderly individuals. In other words, forgiveness led to less risk or less symptoms of depression. The developmental task of finding integrity and avoiding despair showed to be a significant mediator in this relationship. So they concluded that forgiveness was about finding integrity and avoiding despair in these people, and that led to a protective effect in terms of avoiding depressive symptoms or lessening depressive symptoms. Howell et al. 2017 study titled Buried Hatchets, Marked Locations, Forgiveness, Everyday Racial Discrimination, and African Americans Men's Depressive Symptomatology. So they studied 3 strategies of granting forgiveness of everyday racial discrimination, or ERD. These were letting go of negative emotions or negative release, embracing positive emotions or positive embrace, or a combination of both negative release and positive embrace. They found that higher combined and negative release forgiveness were directly related to lower depressive symptoms among 18 through to 25-year-olds. Also detected a less pronounced positive relationship between everyday racial discrimination and depressive symptoms among men reporting high levels of combined and negative release forgiveness. They observed a more pronounced positive ERD depressive symptom relationship among 18 through 25 and 26 through 39-year-olds reporting lower forgiveness. So you see that this study basically shows that a lack of forgiveness for everyday racial discrimination that these men faced led to them facing more depression or having more depressive symptoms. So forgiveness was found to lower depressive symptoms in these people. And Jung in 2019 study titled Self-Forgiveness Moderates the Effects of Depression on Suicidality. Analysis indicated forgiveness as a moderator of depression on suicidality. In other words, forgiveness decreased depression and suicide ideologies. Further analysis indicated only forgiveness of self as a significant moderator. So here we go, forgiving self as an important factor in combating depression and suicidal thoughts. The effects of forgiveness of others and forgiveness of situations were non-significant according to this study. These findings suggest that forgiveness of self is essential in reducing the effect of depression on suicidality. It is suggested that self-acceptance and promotion of self-forgiveness should be considered as an important factor when developing suicide prevention strategies. How strong is that study? Very important study here on preventing suicide and the link of self-forgiveness to preventing suicidal ideology. So quite a few studies there that show the value of forgiveness of self and of others in terms of decreasing depression symptoms and the risk of depression. Facing the truth and forgiving and taking action once we forgive is very important in your endeavors to overcome and master depression. And part of this process is knowing the value of talking. You must talk about your problems with other people, even with yourself. You'll be surprised how much people avoid confronting their problems and having a personal discussion in their heads or otherwise about what is going on with them. Therapy helps a lot in learning and understanding the truth of your situation. So that is the value of therapy sometimes. Sometimes it is hard to confront these truths that might be buried deep in our psyche, and you need somebody, a professional, to ask you the right questions in order for you to make the right connections and to realize what was happening to you and therefore realize how that made you feel. And that is part of the process of confronting the truth. That's why talking to a professional or to even a friend that is understanding can help you to confront the truth, to first of all realize the truth and face it once you talk about things and what is going on with you. It can also help you come up with solutions. Now, I won't go in this in detail here because we covered it in terms of seeking professional help on another video on psychotherapy. So go back to that video if you need to and relook at that. But it will be very valuable for you to realize that talking helps, whether to a friend, a family member, a spouse, a girlfriend, and so on, or a professional. Talking through your issues helps you to be able to recognize and find the truth of your situation and to be able to deal with it. So you can be free of your past and your mistakes. You can be free of hurtful people that have done bad things to you in the past or even in the present. You can be free of hurtful and harmful situations. You can start afresh with a clear conscience, with determination, with focus, and a free heart, most importantly. So that's it. There you have it. The number one method to gain absolute mental freedom is forgiveness. And forgiveness requires that you face your problems, you confront the truth about your present or your past, and that you find solutions to it, you deal with it. So you find ways to free yourself of the burden of the hurt that caused you. You find ways to not let that define your present and your future. You find ways to let go of that attachment to the person that hurt you, and you find ways to not get yourself back in a situation where you're vulnerable to be hurt by them again, or the situation that happened to you. That is the number one method to gain absolute mental freedom. If you practice this in your life, you will see immense results. It may be uncomfortable, it may be unpleasant, it may be a hard journey. I'm not saying it'll be easy for you, but it is absolutely necessary if you want to overcome and master depression for good. Go through the exercises, apply this to yourself, take your time, think it through. Think about what professional help you might need, because this might be a very difficult area to deal with on your own. Get the necessary help. Think about who you need to talk to help you to handle these issues adequately. Have a great day.